We're gonna just start now because it's 9 o'clock, and as people join on, we'll just join on. I just want to, my name is Naomi Peterson, and I'm the president and founder of Pono Pono Peace Initiative. We're the ones sponsoring or hosting Chad. We're really grateful that Chad was able to make time in his busy schedule, especially with the situation with his mom and just other things that he's working with, that he's willing to come and talk about his book. Just like as a side note, little intro. Chad, I actually first heard about Chad when I was 17 and I first came to BYU, Hawaii. And he was like an old senior, I think. He was like one of my sister's friends or acquaintances. And he wrote some ridiculous thing in the Kalakai newspaper, something super funny. I think it was about mosquitoes in the boys' bathroom or something. I remembered it for so long. It was really funny, him and Jason, his friend Jason. And then when I came back to school just a few years ago, lo and behold, he became one of my professors and one of my favorite professors. I was able to go and discuss as he was writing this book, 70 times 7. He brought it into class and we discussed it. And it was a really profound, really great class. I did it with my two daughters at the same time. And both of them talked about how it was one of the most pivotal classes and most religious, spiritual classes they'd taken so far at school, which says a lot since they had been taking some religion classes. So even though it was a peace building class on a religious class, it was very, very moving and different. And my computer's beeping, so we're going to find out why, and then we're going to turn the time over to Chad, but we're just going to first. Chad, I'm just going to let you
Yep.
go over and I'm going to mute myself. Oh, and there you go. And make sure that the alarm doesn't go off. So I'd just like to turn the time over to Chad. And we're so just grateful that you're here, Chad. And what a great, great opportunity this is.
It's awesome to be here. I want to thank Steve and Naomi and the Pono Pono Initiative for inviting me here, and just for the work that they're doing with our peace building students at BYU Hawaii. I remember when Steve and Naomi both pitched this idea several years ago. That it really became kind of like a senior project for Naomi when she was a student here, and it's always cool when a project goes from the theoretical to the actual, and the great work that you're doing. I see my brother David Whippy on here as well. I want to thank him as the director of the McKay Center and one of my favorite people of all time. And I don't know if you all know how lucky you are to have David Whippy um, steering the ship for the McKay Center, but he's just an incredible peace builder, an incredible man, and somebody that I deeply look up to. I also saw McLean there, and I want to give a shout out to McLean and the wonderful work that she's done for us for years, teaching our 121 class, our restorative justice class. I think she's even teaching something else now as well, and just what a powerful influence she's been on the peace building program. We've got a couple of our field directors, old field directors in the audience. I want to shout out Sydney Short. I see Sydney there, and TK Ford, who's also my son, who's there, and it's great to see them. I see some of our current field directors from BYU Hawaii as well, and then I see a lot of people that I don't know on the screen. So I'm going to ask you a favor. I really don't like Zoom. Part of the reason I don't like Zoom is I feel like I'm talking to a blank screen. So if you would do me the favor of turning on your screen so I can see your face. One of the big principles that we talk about in peace building is seeing people as people, and I can't see you. It's really hard to see a name and see that as well. So if you are in a place where you can turn on your screen and I can see your face, that would be amazing. And here we see a few on. It's great to see some great faces and some former students. I see Julian there. Shout out to him as well. We can't really see you in a little theater as well. You're kind of small and a little bit far away, but I'm grateful for the people that are gathered there as well. Look, I want to start by something that I've been dying to actually say for a while. So it's been a few months since I've been able to say it. So aloha.
Aloha,
You're all
Aloha.
supposed to go
aloha.
off
We're
mute
all
and say
said
it
it.
simultaneously.
We
No, take
all
it all
said
off
it, but
mute.
it was all muted. So
Everybody unmute for a second. We're going to do
yeah.
this together. You don't know how much I miss this. Okay, everybody unmute just for a second. Then I'll have you mute again. Okay, we're almost there. I still see a few mutes. I see a few mutes. Mike Lingalinga, shout out to Mike Lingalinga as well. One of my all-time great friends and mentors at BYU Hawaii. I see him there as well. All right, we're going to try this one more time. Aloha.
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 Aloha. It wasn't exactly how I remembered it over Zoom, but it's still good. It's great to see you. I miss BYU Hawaii. I miss the peace building program, so much, and I miss hearing that word, aloha. I don't get to hear it very much anymore, and to me, it's a sacred word. Because it means more than hello and goodbye to me. But when I was actually a student at BYU Hawaii years ago, and actually took an early version of Hawaiian studies. It was just Hawaiian history at the time, and my kumu, Uncle Bill Wallace, always said that aloha in ancient times was always said after you first put your foreheads together. You breathe in the ha, or the breath of life from the other person, and as you say aloha, what you're saying is, I'm acknowledging your humanity. I'm breathing in your ha, and I'm committing as I breathe it in to help you along your life journey. And whenever I hear that word, I think about this beautiful connection that two human beings can have, touching foreheads, breathing in each other's essence, committing to helping each other along their life journey. And that's what I hear when I hear that word. And it's a deep commitment that I have to the peace building program at BYU Hawaii, uh, to President McKay's vision that from the school would go men and women who would be influences to the establishment of peace internationally, and to all of you here today as well. I miss the program. I miss being back there, and I want to send my aloha to each of you. Um, that I was asked to talk a little bit about my new book, 70 times 7, and then do some Q&As. And I really hope we can get to some Q&As. So I put together a couple of thoughts. You're going to have to read the book to get through the rest of this, but a couple of things that I want to talk about. And the first one is the why. Why did I write 70 times 7? And I wish there was uh, a cooler backstory, but it's probably a pretty indicative backstory of me to talk about how the book got written. I was working on another project with the Maxwell Institute at BYU, giving some peer review to another book that I highly recommend from Patrick Mason and David Pulsifer called Proclaim Peace, which was really the first LDS book to tackle issues and theology around war and peace in LDS culture. And I had a conversation with the director at the time, and the book was doing well, but it was mostly theology, and it was mostly sort of thinking about big ideas around peace building and peacemaking and what have you. And there had been a request for a more grounded approach that took at, like, well, what do we do with all that? What do we actually do with the theology? How do we put it into practice? And I'm a bit ashamed to tell you that the conversation didn't go well. I basically told him, yeah, I'm not the right guy to write that book. I was actually writing a sequel to another book that I'd written called Dangerous Love at the time. I was about halfway through the book. I was going on sabbatical. My goal was to finish that book. And I worked in a lot of interreligious spaces, interfaith spaces, and I was a little bit nervous about, while I was never shy about talking about my faith and, who I was as a person spiritually. I was nervous about writing and publishing on that end. And then what happened next was a sort of Paul or Saul on the road to Damascus moment. I went out for a run in Pupakea up in the mountains, like I do, and the book downloaded. And I don't want to exaggerate this. The entire book downloaded on what became about a 2 hour run. And by the time I got back to my house, I sat down at my computer and I wrote for about 4 straight hours the outline of what would become 70 times 7. And I want to start with um, just two quick things because these were the two organizing things that came to me on the run that were both somewhat new ideas to me, and partly where I felt like I had some inspiration around them. The first one was that this scripture kept coming to my mind on the road and on the run, and it's from Luke 4. The Spirit of the Lord is upon me because He anointed me to preach the gospel to the poor. He has sent me to heal the brokenhearted, to preach deliverance to the captives, and recovering of the sight to the blind, to set at liberty them that are bruised, to preach the acceptable year of the Lord. The context of this scripture is Jesus in his first public sermon in his hometown of Nazareth. This is the first sermon that we have recorded that Jesus gave. He's in his hometown. He's picked a text from Isaiah 61, which would be common for the time for a rabbi to get up and read a text like this. It was a messianic text. And it was a really powerful choice and a word that I'll use later in the book, an audacious choice, a controversial choice. Jesus, in his hometown, the son of a carpenter, was reading a messianic scripture. But it was unlike a lot of the other messianic scriptures that actually you could pull out of the Old Testament at the time, where many of the messianic scriptures talk about a military Messiah, someone who is going to come and sort of militarily defeat whoever it was that was putting the people of Israel in exile. This was very different. It was talking about the poor, the brokenhearted, the delivering the captives, recovering sight to the blind. And this last part, to preach the acceptable year of the Lord, was a really interesting idea. It's actually a reference to Jubilee, which was one of the commandments that the people of Israel had in the Old Testament, where every 50 years, basically, they reset. They would give back land that had been sold so that families could recover. Slaves were freed, debts were forgiven, land was left fallow for the year so that even it had a Sabbath, if you will, to recover. It was a reconnecting and a resetting of relationships that was meant to close the gap between the poorest and the richest. It was meant to set everyone on a level playing field. It was the Lord basically hitting the reset button every 50 years and saying, we're going to go back to a place where there are no poor among us. If you remember, the reaction to the crowd is quite hostile. They first question, is this Joseph's son? Then began demanding a miracle from Jesus, and the story ends with them actually trying to throw Jesus off a cliff. And to my knowledge, Jesus never returns to Nazareth. He never returns to his hometown. It's a tough way to start a ministry. But there's another thing that was bothering me on the run. I don't have the scriptures memorized by any stretch of the imagination, but the quotation to Isaiah 61 didn't quite seem right to me. It seemed like there was something missing. And as my head was working through it, it finally remembered. Jesus edits the scripture from Isaiah. He leaves part of it out. And the part that he leaves out to me is pretty powerful. And it's that little verse right at the end. And the day of the vengeance of our God. Jesus leaves that out. And as I was running, my mind began spiraling to why? Why did he choose this particular scripture? What is Jesus trying to say to everyone here? Is this Jesus's mission statement, if you will, for his coming 3-year ministry on the earth. Is there something important here that Jesus is trying to tell us about who he is and who he isn't, and what he's about to do? And from there, the rest of the book unfolded. I started to see in so many circumstances throughout the New Testament, Jesus is actually living this prophecy. He is preaching the gospel to the poor. He is healing the brokenhearted. He is preaching deliverance to the captive. He is recovering people's sight. He is preaching liberty to the bruised. He is preaching reconciliation. He is inviting us to not only reconcile with God, but to reconcile with each other. And he's asking us to do it peacefully, with love, without vengeance, without acrimony, without contempt for our enemies. He is asking us to love our enemies. And I started to understand why the people of Israel would be frustrated with this message. They were under a brutal occupation from the Romans. The Romans were a violent and very totalitarian ruling group of people. They curtailed their religious freedom, their economic freedom, their social freedom. They were under the yoke of a brutal empire. And they all thought that the only way out was for a Messiah to come and militarily deliver them out. They did not want to hear, love your enemy, turn the other cheek, love the poor, heal the brokenhearted. They wanted a Messiah that was going to kick some butt. And what they got instead was a Messiah who had a very different way of going about what Paul later would refer to as the ministry of reconciliation. And as I began pondering that, the rest of the book really unfolded to me, including the title of the book, 70 times 7. And I'll talk just a little bit about that in a second. The book's is structured into 4 sections. And these 4 sections are, in my mind, 4 very practical ways that Jesus is teaching us how to preach reconciliation or how to practice reconciliation to one another. We need to love our enemies. We need to, again, kind of quoting Paul here, see with the eyes of our hearts instead of with the eyes of our flesh. When we see people as objects, when we see people as we cannot reconcile. Jesus sees us perfectly. He walks into so many situations where people are cast out or mistreated, or are unseen or unloved and unheard, and he immediately sees people for who they are. He sees them with the eyes of his heart. And it has a powerful effect on the people that he sees. There's so many stories in the scriptures where Jesus sees someone differently than everyone else around them. And it comes with a huge change of heart and a desire to follow Jesus. The second thing was Jesus teaches us to roll away our stones. It was practice in Jesus's time when you sinned to actually pick up stones and throw them at people. And there were actual commandments around this at a time. We know a very famous story that happens in the New Testament where a woman is caught in the act of adultery, and Jesus is asked whether she should be stoned or not. And Jesus famously says, "He that is without sin cast the first stone." Jesus instead invites us to roll away our stones. Stones beget more stones. They cause conflict escalation. They set into motion conflict spirals that are really, really difficult to undo. When we roll away our stones, we invite people into peacemaking spaces. But this is very hard to do because we often feel justified. Our stones feel like they're thrown in defense or they're thrown to give justice to other people. And Jesus really turns that on his head throughout his ministry, to the point that even on his cross, he is asking God to forgive, to roll away the stones, if you will, towards the very people who are executing him at the time. Take the risk of embrace is my favorite section in the book because it feels really dangerous. This is Jesus saying that when you've been offended, when you've been mistreated, when you've been hurt, when you feel like there is conflict between you, you're not supposed to run away. nor are you supposed to fight. You're supposed to stand your ground, open up your arms, and invite the person who you're in conflict with into embrace. And I talk in the book about four steps that Miroslav Volf, who's a Serbian theologian, describes in his book Exclusion and Embrace, which is one of my favorite books on theology that exists. He says first we have to open our arms. We have to actually open up ourselves to the person we're in conflict with. If you think about when we're in conflict, we're often protecting ourselves. Our backs are turned. We're elbowing. We're putting up our guard. If you can see the picture on the screen, though, our arms open, it sort of looks like somebody, right? It looks to me like Jesus on the cross, arms open, exposed, vulnerable, dangerous in part because I'm not protected, but showing a willingness to another person to de-escalate the conflict, that there's safety there, that they can come towards you and be embraced. The second step is that we have to wait. We're not supposed to go and do a flying squirrel hug on the other person when they're not ready for that. We're supposed to patiently wait with our arms open until the other person is ready and feels safe to come. Then the easy part, we close our arms around them and we embrace them. And then the hard part, we open our arms and let them go. We let them know that our love for them is not contingent on them staying in embrace with us, but that we'll give them space to do what they do next. I've often found that this is one of the biggest obstacles in peacemaking. People want the other person to go first. They want the other person to take the risk of embrace. Once they open up their arms, once they're invitational to me, I'm willing to come and change. And because both parties in conflict often feel this way, embrace never happens. And then finally, the ministry of reconciliation. Our goal is not coexistence. Our goal is not some sort of negative peace where we tolerate each other. Our goal is reconciliation, restoration, reconnection in ways that not only bring us back into each other's grace, but deepens our love and connection to one another. Jesus's ministry is a ministry of the restoration. We often talk about restoration in LDS culture as like an event that happened in 1820 with Joseph Smith, or maybe it's 1830 when he established the church. But I think Jesus is talking about an ongoing restoration. It is a never-ending process of reconciling, of being hurt, of having to turn the other cheek, of having to roll away our stones, of having to take a risk of embrace again and again and again. We are never reconciled. We are always reconciling. We are not just restored, we are in the process of restoring. Peace is not a noun or a destination, it's a verb. It's something that we are doing again and again and again, which gets me to the title of the book, 70 times 7. And I want to just tell, we're going to skip that for a second. I just want to tell a quick story that's actually not in the book about Peter, which I think is a really interesting story. It's an apocryphal story, by the way, so it's not actually in the Bible. But Jesus asked all of his apostles to take a stone and carry it from one village to the other, and each of the apostles pick up a stone. And Peter takes a really small stone, saying, well, Jesus didn't actually say what sort of stone we have to take. So he takes a very small stone, one that he can fit in his pocket, and he carries it to the next town. As he gets to the next town, Jesus turns each of the apostles' stones into bread, and it becomes their lunch for the day. But Peter's not feeling great about it because his loaf of bread is very, very small. And he's a little bit frustrated with Jesus and said, well, if I had known what you were going to do, I would have obviously picked the bigger stone. Jesus says, fine, fair enough. Let's try the exercise again. We're going to the next town. Let's pick another stone. And this time, Peter picks the biggest stone that he can possibly carry because now he's really hungry. And he carries it to the next village over. And this time, though, Jesus changes it up again and tells all the apostles to throw their stones into the river. And Peter is again frustrated because now he has the biggest stone and it's the hardest stone to throw into the river. And so he approaches Jesus questioning and asks Jesus, why didn't you tell me this? And to which Jesus responds, Peter, who are you carrying the stone for? And I think it's a really interesting question. Why do we do what we do? Why are we disciples of Jesus? Why would we practice Jesus's way of peacemaking? Certainly, there could be personal advantages for us for doing so. But I think there's a deeper question. And I really love Peter because Peter in the scriptures really defines what I call the skeptic in the scriptures. I don't know if Peter actually was this skeptical all the time of Jesus or whether he was used by the gospel writers as a bit of a foil, right? The skeptic in all of us. So I just want to go over a few things with Peter before we get to our questions, because the biggest question that I'm being asked in podcast interviews and book talks that I'm getting is, yeah, this Jesus stuff is really, really hard. I'm not sure Jesus meant it for our times. I'm not sure whether it was meant as a metaphor. Perhaps, turn the other cheek is hard, let alone 70 times 7 times. I'm not sure that I even believe Jesus on this particular point, especially when you know my enemies or the people that I'm struggling with. And I would say to everyone who says that, Peter would empathize with you. I think you would think it was tough. So let's just go through some highlights from Peter. For example, there's the first one. What gets in our way of being peacemakers? A lot of times it's selfishness, right? We want other people to be peacemakers towards us because it benefits us, but it's hard work when we're having to do it towards others. Much like the story about the stone. The second one, oh, we got two. The second one is unbelief. Um, Jesus asked one time his apostles to cast out devils, and they can't do it. And Peter asked Jesus, "Why couldn't we drive it out?" And Jesus replies, "Because you have so little faith." Sometimes the peace building Jesus's way is hard because we just lack the belief. There's another time when Peter asked Jesus, Lord, how many times shall I forgive my brother or sister who sins against me? Up to 7 times. And Jesus answers, I tell you not 7 times, but 70 times 7. And to me, I hear impatience, right? Like, how often am I actually have to follow Jesus's way? How many times do I have to show forgiveness or love or the risk of embrace or, turn the other cheek? I'm sure Peter thought, this is kind of crazy, Jesus. There are so many things that you're asking to do. This stuff is really hard. Let's put some limits on it so that I know when I don't have to do this anymore. And what I hear Jesus saying, which is why I named the book 70 times 7, is, look, Peter, you don't understand. There's no limit on this because this is the mission. This is why I am here. We do it until it's done. We do it until it's done, Peter. 70 times 7 is an infinite amount of times when we are involved in the gospel of reconciliation. The goal is reconciliation. And so the question is, I do it until I'm reconciled, however many times that it takes. I find a lot of times I lose patience with that and want it to be shorter. Power. Sometimes when it's not working, can't we just bulldoze the other person? Can't we just take things into our own hand and make peace happen? And you see this when Jesus is arrested in the Garden of Gethsemane. And you see here, Jesus tells Peter, put your sword back. For all who draw the sword will die by the sword. Do you not think I can call on my Father? Jesus is teaching us that power, the military Messiah, violence, force is not the way. Love is the way. And sometimes we have to be willing to put aside our power. It's interesting. One of the beatitudes in the Sermon on the Mount is, "Blessed are the meek." And it's interesting. Meek takes on a lot of connotations, but one of the definitions of meek is someone who has the ability or the power but chooses not to use it. right? I could force you to do something, but in this case, I actually choose not to. Fear. Peter, when Jesus is arrested in Jerusalem and is at trial, says three times in three different instances, I do not know the man. This is getting dangerous. This is getting out of control. This no longer benefits me to be a disciple of Jesus. And so Peter, and I don't blame him, like many of us in maybe his situation, would say, I do not know him. And the last one, which for some reason I can't see on my screen, is comfort. Um, right? Peter, after the oops, now I got to bring all these back. Peter, after Jesus is crucified, along with the other apostles, actually locks himself in a room and is hiding and is afraid. And the resurrected Jesus actually appears to him, and he says the word shalom, which in Hebrew means peace be unto you. It also means hello. And he's inviting the apostles like, this is okay. You think the world has ended, but actually the world has just begun. You think that somehow the Messiah has lost here, that the ministry is over. I'm here to show you with this resurrected body that I'm actually ushering in something new, something revolutionary, and you're my disciples. And Peter's reaction to all this, along with some of the other disciples, is actually to say, yeah, okay, I'm going to go back to Galilee and go back to being a fisherman. Right. And we don't know the motivation behind it. But my guess is some of it's comfort. It's been a hard 3 years with Jesus. The political situation, the safety situation seems rough. And so I'm gonna do something that's easier or more comfortable to me. And so Jesus has to reappear to Peter and the disciples on the shores of Galilee, point to the fish that they've caught, and ask Peter a pointed question three times: Peter, do you love these more than you love me? And each time Peter says, Lord, of course, I love you more than these fish. And Jesus says, go feed my lambs. And I think something powerful happens to Peter at this point. He needs to get over himself. He needs to have faith. He needs to have patience. He needs to use the only power that actually changes hearts, the power of love, not the power of force. He needs to let go of fear. He needs to forget about the comfort that he has for a minute, and he needs to go and further the work. Now, we're hard on Peter, but I want to tell one last story about Peter, because I think something powerfully changes in Peter. Jesus actually refers to him as the rock upon which I'm going to build my church. I'm right. The rock who showed selfishness, the rock who showed unbelief, the rock who showed impatience, the rock who was prone to violence, the rock who showed fear, the rock who chose comfort over that. And I think that part of this story is telling all of us, like, of course, we're going to have these reactions to peace building, to peacemaking our time. It will feel dangerous. It will feel hard. It will be difficult, but we will not do it alone. Jesus will be there to help us. And when I think Peter fully understands that, he does something extraordinary. He actually changes the world. He actually, along with the other apostles, defeats the Roman Empire without drawing a sword, without killing a person, through preaching the gospel. There's this moment where Peter's redemption arc is so powerful. I just want to share it with you. One of my favorite scriptures. Peter brought the sick into the streets and laid them on beds and mats, so that at least people brought the sick into the streets and laid them on beds and mats, so that at least his shadow might fall on them as he passed by, and all of them were healed. Remember this guy who couldn't cast out devils? Remember this guy? Now Peter is so powerful that his very shadow will heal people. He becomes the rabbi. He becomes like Jesus. Peter is a waymaker, like Jesus is a waymaker. He makes a way out of no way. And I've been using this term a lot in the last couple of years and thinking about what is peace building. I think it's a loaded term. It can mean a lot of different things. And I love this idea that peacemakers are people who go to people who feel stuck, who feel trapped, who feel like there's no way out, and they find a way out of no way. They help them make ways out of no way. And so I'm going to open it up to questions at this time. If you, but I want to end with a couple. You know what? Let's do questions, and then I'll end with a couple of these verses at the end. Let's do questions first. Not everybody at once.
So I do have a question. So when you were telling your story about how the book kind of downloaded and you wrote it, were you in that process of like you when you told the story, you said you were on a path. You're this way. Someone said like, come over here, and you're like, no, I have a direction, I have a path. And then suddenly you had this new path before you. Was there a sense of like loss or grief when you realized you had to let go of what you wanted to go somewhere else?
Yeah, Naomi, there was selfishness, there was unbelief, there was impatience. There was like, I have a book contract, I can go another way. This is going to be way harder. There was fear about, look, I really love Jesus, and writing about him. I didn't want to mess it up. I didn't want to get it wrong. I worried a lot about how people may take it. I wanted to do it right. And there was this sense of comfort. I already have this book almost done. I'm going to have to do something that's way out of my comfort zone, that I haven't done before. I can tell you, I went through all those emotions. That's why I love Peter. I like recognize all of it in myself. And by the way, those obstacles, even after things downloaded, and even after I spent 4 hours, and even after I sent that 4 hour draft to the Maxwell Institute, and they came back right away with a contract and said, "Yep, this is the book. It's great." I wrestled with it a lot for the next couple of years as I was writing it. My own personal inadequacies, my own sense of wanting to get it perfect and right, and critiques that I would get back, peer reviews that I would get back, from the book. At times, I experienced all of those emotions many, many times. And I talk about this and write about this now, especially talking to young peace builders, because I continue them. I'm a more experienced peace builder now. I continue to experience these things all the time in mediations that I'm doing, when I'm teaching classes, when I'm trying to lead programs, when I'm trying to work in the Middle East and bring people together. Uh, just like reconciliation is an ongoing process, belief and faith, and overcoming fear, and getting more patient, and overcoming selfishness. All of those things to me are ongoing things that I continue to confront and work on, so that I can be a better disciple for Jesus.
That's so interesting. I just want to clarify. So I see all those emotions. The one emotion though that like I'm imagining if I'm in that position and I've also have been in and I have all of those, one that you haven't mentioned, but I find at least for me is the sense of grief and loss when I have one dream and I have to let it go and go for somewhere else. Whether it's I really want to reconcile with someone and it's taking longer.
Mm,
And the reason why I just think it's important, like for me to recognize, I remember not always understanding all the feelings that I was going through. And I love how you write it out like this. But grief is something that I
mm,
don't know that we talk about so much in this process. And I think that once we realize, at least for me, when I realize, oh, I'm at this emotion is a loss. It's a feeling like I
mm.
have to do a different path. So I was just curious if in your journey as you've gone, because like, and sometimes it's hard to admit grief when you're going towards something that you consider better, right?
Yeah,
But the letting
yeah.
go, there still sometimes could be pain and there could be like a struggle there. I was just curious about whether there was a more like a little bit of a loss for you at a part of this.
That's a great question. Um, and it may just be an emotion that I wasn't alive to, right, at the moment. I've had this experience several times in my life where I feel called to do something, and it's not always the call that I want, but I've always felt an assurance with the call that it's the call that I need. Um, and that actually the call is grace towards me in the moment. It's a loving God that knows what I need more than I know what I need right now. And while I may experience the call as scary or all of those different things, my faith has grown tremendously over the years. That when the call comes, it is grace. Um, it is God seeing things more clearly than I can see them, and actually a gentle and loving course correction that says, Chad, um, you're about to do something that isn't actually what you need to be doing right now. I need you here. You need to be here at this moment, and you may not understand it. You may not agree with it, but you'll eventually experience it um, as grace. And if you want to talk about grief, um, it was leaving Hawaii and leaving BYU Hawaii. It wasn't writing this book. That wasn't where I was experiencing grief. It was a call to be somewhere else when I was not only content but happy to be where I was for the rest of my life. And if you ever talked to me, I would tell you that I would be there for the rest of my life with a program that I love, with students that I loved, with a community that I loved, with a mission that had driven me and resonated my whole life. And the grief that I experienced was enormous, except that experience and faith had taught me um, that either I was needed somewhere else or I needed to be somewhere else, right? And probably it's a combination of both of those things, and that has been the not this book, but actually not being with all of you as this book's coming out. All of you that helped inspire this book, a peace building program that really helped me crystallize an idea of Christian peacemaking and peace building together. That's where the grief hit. But grief doesn't carry with it the pain that it once did. It's a sense of loss, but also a sense of hope, and a sense of understanding that with a call is coming something good.
Thank you. McLean, it looked like you were coming up to the computer. Did you have something that you wanted to ask?
That's actually me. Um, I do have a question, if that's okay. Do we still have time for more questions? Okay, awesome. So just to preface the first question, we getting some feedback.
A
Is
little
that
bit of
better?
feedback, don't worry.
Can
Yeah,
you guys
that's
still
better.
hear me? Oh, now we can't hear you.
Mhm.
Here,
We're good.
let me
We can handle the feedback. It's fine. Just go ahead. I'm sure we'll interpret.
maybe I'll mute this. Okay, I'll just ask my question and then we'll fix it so that we can hear you guys. So, um, it's about the risk of embrace. And I was in a class with you where it was our group conflict dynamics. It was a really fun class. And I really appreciate the experiences I had in there. But one of the times, one of the opposing team members, the way the class worked, there were two teams. We were working against each other and working with each other at the same time. It was a good class. And one of the people on the other teams made this sacrifice and you called it like, oh, she has a Jesus complex now. And so I was wondering how you take the risk of embrace without developing a Jesus complex, because I feel like it can be so easy to be like, oh yeah, I loved them first, I did this first, I did that, and kind of turning first in that way. Having your arms open and ready and thinking of yourself as this Jesus figure. So how do you take that risk of embrace without, and I'm sure you answer it in the book, but I haven't had the opportunity to get my hands on a copy of the book yet. So if you can answer that question, thank you.
Thank you, Maya. I probably more than anything else was trying to keep the conflict going in that class because as you know in that group dynamics class, part of the effectiveness is to actually get people in pretty significant conflict with each other throughout that. And so whenever you guys made peacemaking moves, I was more playing the devil in those moments, often trying to bring us back into conflict. But let's talk about the Jesus complex for a minute and what we do and what Jesus does. And to me, Jesus invites us to be like him. He says, "What manner of men ought we to be, even as I am?" He wants us to be like him, but there are ways that we can't be like Jesus. We don't atone for other people's sins, for example, right? No matter how much we love Jesus or follow Jesus, we are not the savior in that way. We can't on our own atone for sins or forgive sins the way that he or God can. And so that's one way that Jesus we can't be like Jesus. We can't die for all of humanity like Jesus can, right? Like there's some really specific roles that Jesus plays in our life that we should never get mixed up on who's doing it. I don't heal people. Jesus does the healing, for example. So, what is it when Jesus says, "What manner of men ought ye to be, even as I am"? And to me, the clues found in two places. In John, when he tells his disciples four times at the Last Supper, as I have loved you, love one another. By this shall people know that you're my disciples. Like, I don't know how Jesus can be any clearer than he is right now. Like, if people want to know whether you're a disciple of me, that you love them as I have loved them. How that connects to the risk of embrace to me is pretty powerful, right? Jesus's arms are always outstretched. They are always open. I actually quote Mumford and Sons in the book, along with a couple of Taylor Swift's and an Arcade Fire quote, all for the first time, I think, in a Deseret book. But there's this line from this song called "Roll Away Your Stones" that says, "It's not the long walk home that will change your heart; it's the welcome I receive at every start." And I think that is a really powerful way. The other way it actually comes in the third Nephi, the chapter after Jesus says, "What manner of men I ye to be, even as I am." And it's actually a story that happens when he grants his 12 disciples in America a wish, sort of like a genie. Jesus is going to say, "Hey, I'll give everybody a wish," and nine of the disciples say, "Look, Jesus, we love you so much. We want to go speedily to heaven to be by your side in heaven. This has been such a powerful experience. We can't wait to die and be with you in heaven." And Jesus says that they're blessed. But then there's the three disciples that actually it says they look ashamed when they hear that, because it's like, oh man, that was probably the right answer. I mean, this is God. It's what God wants to hear, right? And Jesus notices it and asks them, like, what's troubling you? And he said, well, we actually wanted to stay on earth for as long as we possibly can and preach your gospel. We want to go and to try to bring as many people as we can to you. We actually don't want death. We want to continue in your service forever. And it's so interesting. Jesus's response to them is, more blessed are you for this thing. And then he tells them in his blessing, you shall be even as I am. I think there's two ways to approach our discipleship with Jesus. And neither is wrong, because notice that Jesus said blessed to the first one, but one is of adoration and worship of Jesus, and desiring to be with him and feel his spirit in any sorts of circumstances that we're in. And that's a good one. It's good to adore Jesus and love him and praise him and want to feel his spirit. But there's another way where we take him seriously. Um, and we take his words seriously. And we look at him not just as the redeemer of my sins, but also the redeemer of my brother and sister. We look at him not at just the great reconciler between me and God, but between myself and my neighbor, between myself and others. And that I take seriously that mission as well. The gospel is not just about our individual salvation, our individual reconciliation between us and God. It is also, and importantly so, about our reconciliation with each other. The three Nephites understood it, I think, at a deep level. And we're not just praising and loving Jesus for the first of the missions, a mission that we cannot replicate, that we cannot do, but taking on the second one, much like Peter, and leaving their fish at the seashore to leave that world of comfort and to care and love for others. I think we may be out of time. Can I share a couple of just last thoughts with you? This is one of my favorite scriptures. It's from the Mishnah, which is a writing of the rabbis in the Jewish faith. And I want us to think about it in the context of the world that we live in right now, how daunting peace building may feel at home, in our communities, at our jobs, and certainly as we look out at a world that's growing in animosity and anger in the world. It's a prayer that I find myself repeating often. Do not be daunted by the enormity of the world's grief, and do justly now, love mercy now, walk humbly now. You're not obligated to complete the work, but neither are you free to abandon it. It's been a powerful mantra to me, as has been this quote by Eric Fromm. To have faith means to dare, to think the unthinkable, to realize the limits of the realistically possible. It is the paradoxical belief that the Messiah every day, sorry, I can't read some of this. I gotta move this over, sorry. Is the paradoxical hope to expect the Messiah every day, yet not to lose heart when he has not come at the appointed hour. The hope is not passive, it is not patient, it is, now I can't see this. On the contrary, it is impatient and active, looking for every possibility of action. And so the question for all of us is, where do we start? How do we start following Jesus? And I love this poem by David White. Start close in. Don't take the second step or the third. Start with the first thing close in, the step that you don't want to take. Peace building always starts small. It doesn't start big. It starts with our individual hearts and then spreads out to our neighbors, to our family, to the people that are often close to us. And then it can start to take hold in communities, take hold in larger types of settings. We often become overwhelmed with peace building because we start at the big world and say, how does this affect Vladimir Putin and the war between Russia and Ukraine? Will this end the war in the Middle East between Palestinians and Israelis? And while I actually believe the answer to that is yes, it's the wrong place to start the conversation. Start close in. Don't take the second step or the third. Start with the first thing, the conflict that's closest to you, the step that you don't want to take, and the thing that you have the most control over in your life. And so here's just 3 steps if you want to think about getting started. We talked a little bit about this in the Q&A. What challenge do you feel called to engage? Everything starts with a call. In the scriptures, everything starts with a call. If you do not know what your call is, spend some time actually thinking about, what do I feel called to do? How do I feel called to help with the world? That's the challenge. And then you have a choice. what from your faith tradition compels you to act, right? There'll be lots of reasons to say no to the call. There'll be lots of reasons that you'll be able to think of why it's impractical, why it's too challenging, too hard, scary, not the right time, what have you. And instead of finding the reasons to not do it, we ask ourselves, what from our faith compels us to actually answer the call and act? And then finally, we act. We make a choice and then we step into the breach. We are like Peter stepping onto the water. I love, I'm sorry, we have a lot of Peter stories, but I think it's so interesting that we criticize Peter for a moment that I actually think he shows incredible faith. There's a storm. Peter's on a boat. He sees Jesus walking to him, and Jesus beckons him to step out of the boat and walk towards him. And I don't know about you, but I don't actually think I would have the faith to take the first step. Peter does. He has the audacity to take a few steps before he starts to sink. He acts. Um, and when none of the other apostles that I know of did, right? He took the step onto the water. And notice that Jesus did let him sink a little bit, but he didn't let him drown. What are we doing? What are our actions that are moving Jesus's and President Nelson's call to be peacemakers? What is the first step that we take? How do we take it? We take it with faith. There might be trepidation, there might be fear, there might be some unbelief. But what is the step that I take where I step on the water and trust Jesus that I might sink a little, but he's not going to let us drown? Okay.
Thank you so much, Chad. That gives me a lot of things to think about. I love your last question, and especially I wish you didn't get rid of that slide because I love how you were, no, it's fine, but I love how you talked
It's
about the
coming
call.
back.
Oh, good. The call, and then the fact that what is in your what from your faith tradition compels you to act. Because I think when you can couple the call with something that's core inside of you, it makes a huge difference on how well you answer that call and also how you deal with the difficulties that come with it. And so I really appreciate you coming and sharing this book. I loved also your answer to my question about how every call has been a call of grace, where God has had something bigger and better for you. And even like when you were talking about leaving Hawaii and the loss of leaving Hawaii, and yet you had come to a point where you had faith that you'd seen it over and over in your life, that it was going to bring you somewhere bigger and better. And so I think that's really wonderful. And I think it's a good message. It's a good message for me and for everyone who's here listening, because we're all on this path together, and being able to see someone like you who is more experienced and who's a little bit more experienced, and that to be able to learn from you, it's really helpful for us who are further down the path, because as I've learned, you can't do it alone. You actually need to have mentors and people on the path with you. And so I'm glad you put up your slide about your Waymaker. Do you want to just, before we close, just give a little moment about what
Yeah.
this is and that?
So I started a newsletter and a website that if you subscribe to, you'll get periodic emails. Some of them are chapters of the book, 70 times 7. We're going to release the first audio clip from the book this week, podcast, tools like conflict styles test, a bunch of stuff from Dangerous Love as well. I've written a bunch of essays about that. You can actually read more about the Peter story in there, an update on my work with peace players and other things like that. But if you're just looking for more free content, it's free to subscribe. You can just get a lot more stuff. And I usually post a couple of things a week. And you can keep learning about 70 times 7 and Dangerous Love, and love to have you part of the community.
I just want to support that. Like one of these things that when you're learning and you're in the middle of learning about peace building and you're like, what am I going to do with this degree? And there's so much that you can do with it. It makes a difference if you actually step into this space where there are people doing it. And so just by signing up to this newsletter, you will be a step ahead and you'll be closer to closing some, being able to have the tools to actually answer your call that you're given. God gives us calls or we have calls within us, but if we don't take the steps to get the tools, then it will make it a lot harder. And I just know from my own experience, being in the space where other people are actually making a difference inspires and brings out things for us. And so I hope all the students and anyone on this list signs up for this and that together we can figure out how we all can make peace everywhere we are. Whether I know there's a lot of students on here, but there's also a lot of community members who have joined us for this as well. And this building peace really is something that is just, it goes beyond the classroom. It starts with us, but it can happen in our families, it can happen in our communities and globally. And so I would encourage whatever path of peace or whatever experience of peace building you are, that you will sign up for this. And I just want to close to say thank you for everyone for coming. We really appreciate this. As Pono Pono, as Chad mentioned, this was my senior project that I did that unfortunately my husband got cancer about the same time I started this, which was unfortunate for our family, but fortunate for the organization because he has now runs it and he's like this world-class, amazing executive director who does all of these wonderful things. And so the whole purpose of our organization is to help students and people on the path of peace building to find ways that they can practically use their degree, their knowledge, and to gain networks and information so that when they graduate or when they actually take the step into the peace building space on a more formal basis, that they have tools, they have mentors, and they have connections, and they have like a vision and a path. And so thank you all for coming. This is wonderful. And we will, and thank you, Chad. I know it's late. Thank you so much. We really appreciate that.
Hello. Thank you, Chad. Hello, brother.
Thank you, brother. Good
Nice
luck.
to see you, David.
Hey, Sarah Duffin.
How's it going, David, over in Hawaii?
Oh, sorry. Doing well. It's
Yeah?
that spring semester, so just started a week ago, so doing well. McLean's actually taking over your restoration class, and so she's teaching that this semester.
Oh, good.
Grateful that we got the book